what is gossip? You could do something very regular where you just tell everybody in turn. Very ordered, very controlled. It's almost like there's a dictator who is now speaking. Everybody has to be quiet. Or you could just do the totally anarchical thing where everybody's equal, and if you just want to spread your message, you just call people at random and tell them your message, and then they call people at random and pass on your message, and they tell people, sort of like rumor, how rumors spread. That's a gossip protocol. Gossip protocols are the fastest, the most resilient way to get a message out to a bunch of computers, and they're also arguably the simplest possible thing you could imagine. There's no rules, you just kind of do it randomly. That's a gossip protocol. It's used all over the place in computer science. You mentioned Bitcoin. It's used 2 different ways in Bitcoin. It's used lots of different places in computer science because it is extremely fast and it gets your message out fast. Sadly, it doesn't give you consensus. It doesn't give you orders. It doesn't give you strong timestamps. It doesn't give you any of the things that we're talking about. But it gets your message out fast. And it's very reliable. If you have a leader, somebody could attack the leader and shut down that one computer and hurt the whole network. And if your leader changes occasionally, they could just track the leader, follow the leader, and keep shutting down the network. But if we're just all talking to each other randomly, who would you shut down? You shut down one computer? We don't care, we just keep talking. You shut down 10 of our computers? We don't care, we just keep talking. It all works great. So gossip protocols are a nice first step in any consensus algorithm, and they are a first step in many consensus algorithms because they're incredibly resilient and incredibly fast. What we do is, in Hashgraph, we do a gossip protocol because it's really nice. And then we add a tiny bit of extra information, maybe 1% more information. Basically, when I send you this big message that has my transactions and a timestamp and my signature, I add 2 hashes. That's it. That's why it's called a hash graph. And by adding, or even a compressed form of those 2 hashes, compresses them down to a couple bytes. I add you just this little tiny bit, and now suddenly you get this hash graph, which is this view of how everybody's talked to everybody in all of history. So what we do is those 2 hashes are actually telling you some information about the last message I received and the last message I created. That's what they're the hashes of. So you know what? We aren't just gossiping about money or gossiping about files or gossiping about identities. With those 2 little hashes, we're actually gossiping about the gossiping itself. That's sort of weird, but that's what we're doing.
And this is the first time that that has happened. Right?
To my knowledge, yeah.
About gossip.
Yes. Gossip about gossip seems to be novel. Yes. Okay. So gossip is really good. Everybody uses it. Gossip about gossip is kind of weird. Why would you want to gossip about gossip? All it gives you is a total history of how everybody did everything. Why do you care? Oh, guess what? You now get consensus for free. That's why we care. And so we do gossip about gossip, and then we use that to enable virtual voting. So you asked about voting. You could think of it this way. If there is some yes-no question that a group of computers want to come to an answer on, what we could do is we could each start with our own answer of yes or no. Everybody sends everybody else their vote, and then you receive the votes from everybody, and you see what the majority was, and you say, okay, that's our consensus. We'll go with that. That would work. Oh, except what if one computer's turned off? Then you'll wait forever waiting for them. Well, you'll say, okay, well, maybe I'll just wait until I get most of the votes, or most votes from most of the people. Oh, but wait, what if you hear from one set of people and I hear from a slightly different set? Well, then maybe I'll see a different majority than you will. It gets really complicated just to try to solve a solution by voting. And so these voting protocols that go back decades, 35 years, what they do is they say, we're going to have multiple rounds of voting. We're going to involve receipts that we also send out to make sure that you don't lie and tell me one vote and tell someone else a different vote. And then we use this mathematical proofs to prove that eventually we'll come to consensus, and it really will work. It's beautiful. But it involves sending votes out to everybody. So if there's 1,000 of us, 1,000 computers, just to do one round, we have to send out 1 million votes. Each of the 1,000 of us has to send it out to 999 other people. It's about 1 million votes. But then you might lie and tell 2 different people different votes. So I have to tell everybody what vote you sent me, and he'll tell everybody what vote you sent him, and then we can compare to see if you're lying. Of course, I might be lying and he might be lying, so you then do even more math to try to take care of that.
And this can go on almost infinitely.
Right. So it goes on. That's 1 million votes now if we're talking about just the votes, but then 1 billion if we have the receipts. And then we might have to do this for multiple rounds, and so we have multiple billions. And then you can have proofs of probability 1. It'll eventually end in, on average, a fast number of rounds. But then that's just to decide one yes-no question. But if we have this flood of transactions coming in that we have to all put in order, that's not a single yes-no question. And we can let one person be the boss who puts them in order, and then we all vote on it or not. That's a common solution. But then you don't have fairness, because the boss can pick them in whatever order he wants. If Alice is the leader and she's putting them in order, she puts them in whatever order she wants, and that's the order we live with. Not fair. And she's a single point of failure that could be attacked. Not good. So we really, the only way we know of getting true security, asynchronous Byzantine, is the gold standard of security. The only way we know to get asynchronous Byzantine is a voting system. But that involves so many votes going over the internet, it is horrendously inefficient. In fact, to my knowledge, nobody has ever deployed in the wild a pure voting system using one of these old voting systems. It's always something lesser or mixed with something else because they're just so horrendously inefficient. But you know what? You do that Hashgraph, you do the gossip, which is a no-brainer. Gossip's great. And then you add a tiny bit, and now you're gossiping about gossip, which is really weird. Then you can run the entire voting system in your head with no votes. So you could say what Hashgraph does is it lets you run a 35-year-old voting algorithm with no votes. It's gossip about gossip with virtual voting. And if you can do that, then you get consensus. How fast are these transactions going to be flowing through the network? Pretty much at the speed limit of how fast your computer is and how fast your connection is. So when we have done timing tests with fast computers and fast connections and not actually processing the transactions, we get incredibly high throughput rates. And those are commonly misunderstood. That doesn't mean you get an incredibly high throughput rate. What it means is that if you have a computer that's able to process a certain number of transactions per second all by itself, and if it has enough internet bandwidth to send and receive that many per second, then what we can do is come along and turn that into a distributed network almost for free. It's not going to slow you down very much. That's the way to think about it. Now, if your transactions are really hard and it takes you a year per transaction to process them, then our network will run at a speed of a year per transaction, but no slower. You're getting the distributed, you're getting the trust sort of for free or for very low cost. And theoretically, at least, if you implement it right, you should be able to come very close to the limits of what the internet will let you do with this kind of a system. The throughput should be just about as fast as a single computer by itself would have. You really shouldn't have to pay much price at all to be distributed. And so that's what we do. Gossip about gossip with virtual voting, and it gives you asynchronous Byzantine, the gold standard of security, mathematically proved. It gives you fairness, which, by the way, many systems don't have proofs for, but fairness of ordering and fairness of timestamps. And you get it really fast, high throughput. So that's what we have.